I know many people believe that a mother's love is unconditional, that children always recognize the sacrifices we make for them. But to be honest, those people have never spent 30 years erasing themselves for a daughter who, on her wedding day, threw her mother out in front of 200 guests as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient stranger. My name is Arlene Walker. I am 60 years old. And this story begins when I was 58 at the most humiliating moment of my life. A moment that should have been filled with joy and pride as a mother. A day of celebration. Instead, it became the day I realized my only daughter, Julia, didn't see me as a devoted mother who sacrificed everything for her, but only as a burden she carried out of social obligation. The morning of the wedding started exactly as I had dreamed for months. I woke up at 5 a.m., not because I needed to, but because my nerves wouldn't let me sleep. It was March 15th. A sunny Saturday in spring, perfect for an outdoor wedding. I had prepared every detail of that morning with the care of someone who knew she was about to live through one of the most important days of her life. I lingered in the shower. The kind of shower you take when you want to feel special. I used the French lavender soap I had saved only for important occasions. And for the first time in months, I didn't rush to check the clock. Today was different. Today, I would be the mother of the bride. The dress I had chosen had been hanging in my closet for 3 weeks. Navy blue. With elegant fabric, not overly expensive, but with the perfect drape that hid the extra weight I had put on since Edward passed away. I had spent nearly a month's salary on that dress. But every dollar was worth it. I just wanted to be perfect for Julia. While doing my makeup, I looked into the bathroom mirror one Edward had installed with such care years ago, and I imagined the moment I would see my daughter walk down the aisle, while I sat proudly in the front row, watching the child I had raised become a wife. I pictured the moment Leonard kissed her, and she turned to smile at me with that radiant grin from her childhood, the one she used to give me every time I surprised her. I arrived at St. Francis Church at 3 p.m., an hour early. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I wanted to greet early guests. I wanted to be there in case Julia needed anything. On the seat beside me lay the carefully wrapped wedding gift, a set of crystal glasses I had bought on a 6-month payment plan. Every dollar in that gift was hours of overtime. But I wanted it to be special, worthy of the love I had for my daughter. The church was dazzling. White roses and greenery covered the altar. Golden ribbons tied neatly at the pews. Afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting shimmering colors across the marble floor. Exactly Julia's dream, though, I only knew by chance, because she had never once asked my opinion on any of the details. I walked toward the front row naturally, because that was where the bride's mother belonged. But before I could sit down, a young man in a black suit approached. "Excuse me. Are you Arlene Walker?" "The bride's mother," I smiled, proud to hear those words. He looked at his chart and frowned. "Ah. Yes. Here you are. You're seated in the 5th row on the left." For a moment, I thought he had made a mistake. The 5th row, but I was the bride's mother. Surely I belonged in the front. The young man hesitated slightly, but kept his professional tone. "The instructions are very clear, ma'am. The front row is reserved for the groom's parents and special family members. You're seated in the 5th row." Those words hit me like a silent punch to the chest. Special family members, the phrase echoed like a cruel sentence. Who had raised Julia alone, who once worked 3 jobs at once to give her everything she wanted, who sold my wedding ring to pay for her dream abroad, was not considered special in my own daughter's eyes. I swallowed my pride. Maybe it was just a mix-up. Maybe Julia was stressed and overlooked the seating. I quietly walked to the 5th row, feeling the curious glances of the guests already seated, surely wondering why the bride's mother was pushed so far from the altar. From the 5th row, I could barely see the aisle. Around me sat strangers, indifferent guests, who likely had no idea who I was. Meanwhile, up front, the groom's parents' seats gleamed with nameplates in gold. Family of the groom. The church slowly filled. I saw Julia's college friends, her co-workers. Familiar faces I only recognized from photos she posted on social media. Everyone knew their place. Everyone had a designated seat except me. Then Leonard's parents arrived. And they were impossible to ignore. Margaret entered like a queen, wearing a pale pink crepe dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her jewelry glittered under the church lights. She greeted people graciously as she made her way to the front row, the place of honor. The seat that should have been mine. The ceremony began promptly at 4 p.m. The opening music echoed through the old stone walls as everyone stood. My heart pounded. Finally, the moment had come. Julia appeared at the entrance. Like a vision. The French lace gown I had only ever seen in magazines fit her perfectly. The veil trailed more than 16 feet behind her, like a cloud. She looked radiant, glowing with happiness. But when our eyes met, when I longed for that one special smile, the smile we once shared in our most precious moments, all I received was a slight, distant nod. The kind you'd give to an acquaintance. She walked the aisle alone. I had offered to walk her down, since Edward was no longer with us. But she politely declined, saying she wanted to walk by herself in his memory. Back then, I thought it was a touching decision. But now, sitting in the 5th row, I began to realize that maybe she only wanted to erase my presence. Throughout the ceremony, I watched Julia with a tightening heart. She smiled endlessly at Leonard, giving him looks full of affection, and her eyes, time and again, drifted toward the front row, where Margaret and Leonard's father were seated. Each tender glance she gave his family shattered a little more of me inside. When the pastor asked if anyone objected to the marriage, a few seconds of silence passed. For one irrational moment, I thought of standing up, not to object to the wedding, but to shout that I existed too, that I was part of this story, that I deserved to be seen and acknowledged. But I stayed seated, silent, as I had learned to do for so many years. The ceremony ended with the bride and groom kissing under a shower of rose petals. Everyone clapped. I did too. Julia and Leonard walked back down the aisle together. Now, husband and wife, smiling at the guests. When they passed the 5th row, Julia saw me and waved again, that same polite wave as before. Outside the church, I tried to approach her to congratulate her, to tell her how proud I was, how beautiful she looked. But I was blocked by a crowd of friends and relatives who immediately surrounded her. All I could do was watch from a distance as Margaret embraced her with the tenderness Julia had never given me, while hearing the kind words I had always longed to say myself. The reception hall was 15 minutes from the church. It was an elegant venue, with manicured gardens and perfect decorations. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, and round tables draped in crisp white cloth filled the main hall. Once again, I searched for my seat, and once again I was directed to a table on the edge of the room, near the restrooms, far from the main table where the bride, groom, and their important families sat. I sat between an elderly couple I didn't know and a woman who introduced herself as Leonard's distant cousin. From my table, I could see Julia at the main table, laughing comfortably with Leonard's parents, raising glasses in toasts, taking part in conversations that seemed lively and full of warmth. She was radiant, completely at ease, as if she truly belonged there. All through dinner, I watched her every move. The way she leaned in to listen as Margaret whispered in her ear. The way she laughed at Leonard's father's jokes. The way she looked so genuinely happy surrounded by those people. And then came the speeches. Leonard stood first, thanking everyone for coming, speaking about love, about family, about the dreams he wanted to build with Julia. It was a heartfelt speech that brought tears to many eyes. Then it was Julia's turn. She rose gracefully, held the microphone, and smiled at the room. In that moment, my heart filled with hope. Maybe now she would talk about our journey as mother and daughter, about how we made it to this day, about the love that had always existed between us. Even through hardship, I want to thank everyone who is here today, she began, her voice clear and full of emotion across the hall. This is the happiest day of my life, and it would not be complete without the people who truly matter. I smiled, ready to receive the acknowledgement I had craved for so long. Especially, Julia continued, raising her glass of champagne. I want to make a toast to the family I chose. Her eyes turned directly toward Margaret, who was smiling back with tearful eyes. The people who welcomed me as their own, who believed in me, who gave me the love and support I always dreamed of. Every word was like a knife to my heart. The family she chose, the love she had always dreamed of. As if I, the woman who gave the last years of her life for her, were nothing but a discarded draft of the family she really wanted. The crowd applauded with emotion. Margaret cried with pride, raising her glass in return. Leonard's father smiled warmly at the young woman he now officially considered his daughter. Then Julia turned to me. Our eyes met across the crowded hall. For a fleeting second, I thought it was finally my turn, that she would say something about our story, about our special moments, about the unconditional love I had always given her. Instead, her eyes went cold and distant. The smile she had reserved for Leonard's parents vanished completely. "Mom," she said, her voice slicing through the silence of the hall. "You can leave now." The world seemed to stop. 200 people turned to look at me. Some were shocked, others disturbingly curious, and a few showed faint traces of pity they couldn't hide. The silence that followed hit my chest like a judge's gavel. My face burned as if I had been slapped in front of everyone. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my wineglass, leaving a red stain on the white tablecloth like blood. I rose slowly, trying to cling to whatever dignity I didn't even know I had left. My knees barely held me, but I forced myself to stand tall. If my daughter wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, then at the very least, I would leave with my head held high. I began walking toward the door, feeling the weight of 200 eyes on my back. Every step stretched endlessly. Every whisper I heard felt like a verdict on my worth as a mother, on my value as a human being. I was almost at the door when I heard the sharp scrape of a chair. Leonard had stood up. But to understand how I ended up in that cruel moment, I must go back. I must tell you about the 12 years that led to that public humiliation, the years in which I slowly went from being a beloved mother to an unwanted presence in my daughter's life. The story truly began on a rainy Tuesday in June. Edward left the house early for work that day. As usual, he was a civil engineer, supervising the construction of a shopping center in the suburbs. I remember waking up that morning with a strange feeling, as if something was about to change forever. He kissed my forehead before leaving, just as he had through 24 years of marriage. "See you tonight, love," he said, straightening the blue tie I had given him for his last birthday. Those were the last words we ever exchanged. The phone rang at 3 p.m. It was the hospital. An accident at the site, a miscalculated beam. A technical error had taken the life of the most honorable man I had ever known. Edward was only 52. And I suddenly became a widow at 46, with a 22-year-old daughter still depending on me. Julia was in her senior year of architecture school when we lost Edward. She had such big dreams for her future, studying abroad in Europe, opening her own firm, building a dazzling career. I knew our financial situation had completely shifted. Edward had been the breadwinner. And while I was a fifth-grade teacher, my salary alone wasn't enough to keep the same standard of living. But looking at my daughter in those first days after the funeral, I made a decision that would define the next 12 years of my life. She would never feel the weight of that loss, no matter the cost. Julia would have everything just as before. The first weeks were brutal. Julia cried every night, and I soothed her as if she were still a child, even though she was already a grown young woman. "It'll be all right, sweetheart," I whispered, cradling her head against me. "I'll take care of everything." And I did. I took on extra classes at school. I started tutoring neighborhood kids in English and math. On weekends, I graded papers for a test prep center. I slept barely 4 hours a night. But Julia still had money for textbooks, outings with Gavin, and the clothes she wanted. 6 months after Edward died, she came to me and said she had won a partial scholarship to study architecture in Barcelona. I didn't hesitate. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance." "Mom," she said, her eyes glowing. "One semester at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. Just imagine studying Gothic architecture on site, seeing Gaudi's works with my own eyes. The cost of studying abroad equaled nearly a full year of my teacher's salary. But how could I deny her dream? I sold my wedding ring, the small white gold band, with a diamond that Edward had saved for months to buy when we got engaged. I sold the pearl necklace from our 10th anniversary, the emerald earrings I received when Julia was born, and even the Swiss watch Edward only wore on Sundays. Each piece sold felt like tearing away a fragment of him. But Julia's radiant smile when she realized she could go convinced me it was all worth it. At least, that's what I told myself. She spent 6 months in Barcelona. During that time, I worked even harder to cover her expenses there, while keeping up with our life at home. I received a few postcards, some photos through WhatsApp, a handful of short weekend calls. She seemed to be living the best time of her life. When Julia returned, something had changed. Her voice carried a slightly different tone. She wore clothes from Europe and constantly compared everything at home to Barcelona. More than that, she looked at me differently. "You should take better care of yourself, Mom," she said once, eyeing the simple outfit I wore. "You always look so tired." I was tired. I was working nearly 14 hours a day to provide for her. But I didn't say that. I just smiled and promised I'd take better care of myself. Julia graduated with honors, and I sat proudly in the front row at her commencement, like any mother would. She quickly landed a job at a prestigious architecture firm, and I thought maybe, finally, my burdens would ease. But the sacrifices weren't over. Julia wanted to move out into her own apartment, perfectly normal for a 23-year-old starting her career. But even with her job, she didn't have enough for a deposit, furniture, or to settle in comfortably. Once again, I found a way. I sold the piano Edward had given me for our 5th anniversary. I took out a loan, committing 30% of my salary for the next 3 years. I furnished her new apartment with love, picking out each item as if I were building my own dream home. And through it all, Julia accepted my help as if it were her entitlement. Never a heartfelt thank you. Never any recognition for the sacrifices I made. Her visits grew fewer and colder. At first, she still came for Sunday lunches. We sat at the kitchen table where she used to do her homework, where we once shared dreams. But gradually, those meals turned into rushed visits. "Mom, I'm busy today," became the usual opener. "I have an important appointment afterward." Sunday lunches became quick dinners. Then just a few phone calls during the week, always while she was driving, at the sound of the engine in the background, always in a hurry to hang up. And then Leonard entered her life. Julia met him at the grand opening of a commercial building her firm had designed. Leonard was the attorney handling the project's legal work. That night, she came home and told me about him with rare excitement. "Mom, I met someone really special today," she said, sipping the coffee I had made just the way she liked. Leonard's a lawyer, graduated from Columbia Law School, and works at a prestigious firm in the city. What she didn't say then, but I would learn later, was that Leonard came from the kind of family she had always wished we could be. His parents, both accomplished, lived in a grand home in the wealthiest part of the city. They had tradition, status, and connections that opened doors. The first time she mentioned meeting his family, her voice carried unusual nerves. "They're so refined." "Mom," she said, twirling her hair. His mother, Margaret, is a well-known lady. She organizes charity events and sits on multiple boards. His father is a retired judge. The message was clear. They were exactly the kind of people she wanted to impress. And me with my small house, my teaching job, my status as a widow scraping by, I didn't fit that image. The changes began with small things. Julia stopped inviting me to important events. When I asked about the dinners or parties she mentioned attending, the answers were always vague. "Oh, just a small gathering. You wouldn't enjoy it." "Mom." During the rare meals we still shared, she began suggesting ways I could modernize myself. Ideas about hairstyles, clothing, more refined manners. "Did you know Margaret speaks 3 languages?" she once said, as if it were a criticism that I only spoke English. And she even took sommelier courses. She knows so much about wine. Me, the woman who couldn't even afford a bottle of local wine at the supermarket, just smiled and said, "I thought that was wonderful." When Julia and Leonard got engaged, 2 years after meeting, I was one of the last to know. She called me on a Tuesday night, just as I was getting ready for bed. "Mom, I have news," she said. And for the first time in a long while, her voice sounded truly happy. "Yesterday Leonard proposed. We're getting married next year." It should have been a moment of joy we shared. Instead, I felt like a stranger in the audience of a play I didn't belong to. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I managed to say. "I'm so happy for you both." "Thanks, Mom. I have to go now. Leonard's here and we're going out to dinner with his parents to celebrate." I hung up and cried alone in the kitchen. Not because of the engagement, but because of the painful truth that my daughter had shared the most important moment of her love life with everyone except me. The wedding preparations were a long chain of small humiliations disguised as practical decisions. Julia only told me things after they had already been decided, always with reasons that sounded reasonable. But in reality, they were just steps to push me further out. "Mom, we decided to have the wedding at St. Francis Church," she said during one of our rare lunches together. "Margaret knows the priest, so we were able to get a really good date." "When is it?" I asked. "March 15th. I know it's a little soon." But that was the only date left. March was only 4 months away. And that was the first time I had heard her mention an actual date. "What about your wedding dress?" I asked, hoping at least we might share a special moment, choosing it together. "Oh, I already bought it," she said casually. "Margaret took me to one of her favorite shops. It's French, and absolutely gorgeous." Once again, I was left out. It was the same with the food, the decorations, the invitations, even the reception venue. Every important decision was made with Leonard's family, especially Margaret, who had now become Julia's model mother. 3 weeks before the wedding, Julia came to visit me. I thought it would be a conversation about final details. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she said, sitting down in the living room with a serious look on her face. My heart raced, hoping that finally she was going to give me a special place in her big day. But what I received was just another wound, wrapped in soft words. "Of course, sweetheart." "What is it?" "It's about the wedding, about your seating at the ceremony, and the reception." My heart pounded harder. I thought this was it. Finally, she was going to give me a meaningful role. Margaret arranged the seating at the church and at the reception. She began, avoiding my eyes, since she knows a lot of important people and Leonard's family is so big. It's hard to fit everyone in the front rows. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. So you'll be at a table that's a little set apart at the reception? She continued. That way I can spend more time with Leonard's friends and family. You understand? Right. It's just to make things easier for me to move around and greet everyone. I understood all too well. I had been officially demoted to second-class guest at my own daughter's wedding. What about my dress? I asked, keeping my voice even. Do you want to see it first? Julia glanced at what I was wearing, a simple blouse with jeans, and her eyes flickered with disapproval. Mom, it would be better if you chose something understated. Nothing too flashy. Margaret will be wearing an elegant blush pink. So maybe you could go with navy or gray. Something that won't stand out. Understated. Not flashy. As if my very presence was already something unpleasant that needed to be minimized. In the days before the wedding, I tried to reassure myself that I was overthinking it, that Julia was just stressed, that when the day came, and she saw me looking polished and elegant, she would remember our bond and treat me with the love I deserved. I bought the best navy dress I could afford. I booked a salon appointment for my hair and makeup. I chose a special wedding gift, a set of crystal glasses I paid off over 6 months. Every dollar I spent on that gift was a dollar I didn't have. But I wanted it to be perfect. Worthy of the love I had for her. On the morning of the wedding, I woke with a mixture of nerves and hope. Despite everything, I still believed the day might open a new beginning for our relationship. That when Julia saw her mother sitting there proud and happy, she would remember all the beautiful moments we had shared. I was wrong. And then something completely unexpected happened. The sound of a chair scraping back boomed like thunder, shattering the silence of the reception hall. Leonard shot to his feet so abruptly his chair nearly toppled over. His face showed no embarrassment, no confusion. It radiated a cold, restrained fury, far more frightening than any outburst. I froze mid-step in my humiliating walk toward the door. 200 eyes, which had just been watching me with pity, now swung to him with growing curiosity. What was happening? Why was the groom standing not to comfort his bride, but to confront her? Julia noticed it too. She turned to Leonard with a strained smile, reaching out as if to soothe him, to pull him back into his seat. Leonard, darling, what are you doing? She whispered. But her words carried across the hushed hall. He ignored her completely. Instead, he stepped forward and, without hesitation, snatched the microphone from her hand. Julia tried to hold on for a moment, but his unyielding gaze made her let go. Before Mrs. Arlene leaves, Leonard said, his voice ringing out through the speakers. I think everyone here needs to know a few things. My heart nearly stopped. Leonard hardly knew me. At most, we had spoken half a dozen times in their 2 years of dating. Always short, polite exchanges, where I had tried not to be a bother, tried to be the invisible mother-in-law Julia clearly wanted me to be. Why was he doing this, Julia? Leonard continued, turning to face her directly. You just publicly humiliated the woman who sacrificed everything to give you every opportunity in life. The word humiliated echoed across the hall like an accusation. A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Margaret, sitting at the head table, had gone pale, clearly struggling to understand what was happening. Leonard, you don't understand, Julia pleaded, her voice now thick with desperation. She's not. We didn't. No. Julia, you're the one who doesn't understand. His voice rose, filled with an emotion I had never heard from him before. Do you all want to know how I learned about Mrs. Arlene's sacrifices? Do you want to know why I'm saying these things? He paused, scanning the room to make sure he held everyone's attention. Because when I went to ask for Julia's hand in marriage, I didn't go to her first. I went to her mother. Like any decent man should. Julia's face drained of color. She clearly hadn't expected that detail to be revealed. And Mrs. Arlene, Leonard continued, his voice now trembling with emotion, welcomed me into her small home where she lives alone. She offered me coffee and cups she had hand-painted herself. Because she didn't own a porcelain set. Every word he spoke landed like a revelation to the guests. I could see the mix of curiosity and growing unease on their faces. And do you know what she did? Leonard went on. She showed me albums of her daughter graduation photos, study abroad in Europe, pictures of every achievement, and she told me, through tears, about every sacrifice she had made. I could hardly breathe. I remembered that afternoon, 6 months before the wedding. When Leonard had come to my door asking to talk, I thought it was just a formality. I never imagined he had actually listened, that he had remembered every word I said. She told me she had sold her wedding ring, the last keepsake of the husband she loved deeply, to pay for her daughter's dream of studying abroad. Leonard said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. I heard sharp, stifled breaths from the guests. Margaret covered her mouth, visibly shocked. She even showed me the letters she had written to Julia while she was abroad. He pressed on. Relentless. Letters overflowing with love and pride, letters that were never answered. She showed me the birthday gifts she had bought year after year, carefully stored away, because Julia was always too busy to come home on those special days. Each word cut like a blade, tearing apart the flawless facade Julia had worked so hard to create for this evening. I watched her collapse in front of 200 people, just as she had made me collapse only minutes before. And do you know what Mrs. Arlene told me that day? Leonard asked, his voice now heavy with sorrow. She told me her greatest fear wasn't dying alone. Her greatest fear was being shamed and dishonored by her own daughter on her wedding day. The entire hall went silent, so heavy you could almost slice through it. Several women at nearby tables were visibly moved, some with tears brimming in their eyes. And I promised her, Leonard said, his voice catching. I promised that would never happen. That I would do everything I could to make sure Julia treated her with the respect a mother deserves. Julia finally spoke again, but her voice was only a desperate whisper. Leonard, stop. You're ruining our wedding. He turned to her with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, but sheer, crushing disappointment. The kind of disappointment that changes forever the way you see someone. No. Julia, you ruined this wedding 5 minutes ago, when you chose to publicly humiliate the very woman who gave you life. He paused, taking a deep breath, as if gathering all his courage for what he was about to say. I cannot marry someone capable of being so cruel to her own mother, he said, slowly sliding the ring off his finger. I cannot build a family with someone who doesn't understand the value of unconditional sacrifice. The gold band gleamed under the chandelier as he carefully set it down on the head table. The sharp sound of metal against marble echoed through the hall like a judge's gavel. This celebration ends here, Leonard declared to the stunned guests. But he wasn't finished. To my shock, and to the shock of all 200 people in that room, Leonard stepped away from the head table and walked toward me. His footsteps echoed in the suffocating silence. Every pair of eyes followed his movements, captivated by the complete shattering of tradition, by the unthinkable reversal of roles unfolding before them. Mrs. Arlene, he said when he reached me, where I stood frozen in the middle of the hall. His voice now was soft, gentle, brimming with the respect I hadn't felt in years. You don't deserve to be treated this way. It would be an honor to escort you out. He extended his arm, the very arm that should have been linked with Julia's, as they walked out together to the applause of the guests. My body trembled so much I could barely move. It all felt unreal, as if I were watching a film where the roles had been impossibly reversed. I don't understand, I whispered. You are an extraordinary woman. Mrs. Arlene, Leonard said, his voice so sincere it pierced me to the core. A mother any child should be proud of. The fact that Julia cannot see that says everything about her character and nothing about yours. Behind me, I could hear Julia sobbing. Leonard, please don't do this. We can talk. We can fix it. He didn't turn back. Instead, he looked straight into my eyes. Julia will have to learn for herself the value of people who truly matter, he said. But you don't need to stay here and be humiliated any longer. Slowly, still in shock, I took his arm. We walked together down the aisle between the tables. Under the stunned gaze of 200 guests, some whispered, while others simply watched in silence. Their eyes filled with rare respect. A few women among the guests were visibly moved, and I saw more than one quietly wiping away tears. At the doors of the hall, Leonard stopped and turned to look at me one last time. Mrs. Arlene, you raised a daughter who is smart, successful, and has everything in life. But unfortunately, the one thing she never learned was gratitude. And without gratitude, every success in this world means nothing. Those words felt like a balm pressed against wounds I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For years I had blamed myself for Julia's growing coldness, always asking what I had done wrong, where I had failed as a mother. Thank you, I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. No, Mrs. Arlene, I'm the one who should thank you for showing me the kind of person I nearly became, for helping me realize in time that character and values matter more than any social glitter. He held my hand for a moment, giving it a gentle, sincere squeeze. You deserve so much more than what you received today. And I truly hope that one day Julia will understand the treasure she has lost. I left the reception hall in a storm of indescribable emotions. I was shattered by the public humiliation my own daughter had inflicted on me. But at the same time, for the first time in years, I felt seen, valued, and protected. It was strange, because Leonard was practically a stranger to me, yet he recognized my worth when my own daughter had treated me like nothing. While waiting for the taxi, Leonard had called for me. I glanced back one last time. Through the glass doors of the hall, I saw the chaos our departure had left behind. Guests were standing, murmuring, clearly trying to make sense of what had just happened. Julia was still at the head table, now surrounded by Margaret and a few friends, her face full of despair. Her dream wedding had turned into the worst nightmare any bride could imagine. And though it pained me to admit it, a small part of me felt a dark satisfaction. After years of being treated like a second-class presence in my own daughter's life, someone had finally stood up and said publicly what should have always been known, that I had worth, that I deserved respect, that my sacrifices were not meaningless. The taxi arrived. As the car pulled away, a strange truth became clear to me. Tonight had been both the worst and the best night of my life. The days that followed that fateful evening turned my life upside down in ways I could never have imagined. That Saturday night, I came home at 10 o'clock, after 2 hours of aimless driving around the city, trying to piece together what had just happened. My house, once a haven of peace, now felt different, smaller, filled with a strange energy I couldn't name. I sat down on the living room sofa, still wearing the navy blue dress I had chosen so carefully, and simply sat there, breathing. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't have to worry about anyone else. I didn't have to think about someone else's needs. I no longer carried the crushing burden of motherhood on my shoulders. The feeling was terrifying, strange, and yet somehow liberating. Sunday morning, at 6 a.m., the phone rang. It was Julia. I looked at her name on the screen, remembering how many times I had rushed to pick up in the past. Always hoping this time would be different. That this time, she truly needed me. For the first time in my life. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she called again. Then again. And again. By the fourth call, I answered. Mom, her voice cracked with desperation. Mom. Thank God. I've been calling you all night. Where were you? Where was I? The question stunned me. How many years had it been since Julia cared where I was? What I was doing? Or how I was feeling I was sleeping? I replied simply. Mom. We need to talk right now. Last night Leonard lost his mind. He ruined everything. Everything. You have to help me fix this. And there, it was the real reason for the call. Not because she was worried about me. Not because she regretted humiliating me. She only wanted me to fix yet another problem for her. How exactly do you expect me to fix it? Julia, you need to talk to him. Explain that it was all just a misunderstanding. That I was just stressed. That I didn't mean what I said about you. Each word landed like a slap across my face. Even after everything that had happened, she still expected me to lie to patch up her life. But that is exactly what you think of me, I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. And it's still true even now. There was silence on the other end. Julia clearly hadn't expected me to push back. Mom. What are you talking about? Of course I love you. You know that. Love and respect are two very different things. Julia. And yesterday, you showed the entire world where I stand in your life. But Mom, her voice rose. Frantic. Desperate. You don't understand. All the guests left. The reception fell apart. Margaret is furious. She said I disgraced the entire family. And Leonard said he doesn't want to see me again. For a moment, I almost softened, almost slipped back into old habits, comforting her. Taking on the responsibility. Doing anything to make things easier for her. But something had changed in me since last night. Leonard's words still echoed in my mind. You deserve more than what you've received. Julia, I said, weighing each word carefully. For the first time in your life, you're going to have to face the consequences of your own choices. What, Mom? You can't be serious. I'm very serious. Good luck. Julia, and I hung up. My hand trembled as I set the phone down on the table. I had just done something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I had said no to Julia. I had drawn a boundary. I had refused to be used one more time. And you know what? For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. The phone rang again. Over and over. For 3 hours. Julia tried to call me. Then came the texts. At first, desperate pleas. Then, angry accusations. Then back to begging again. Mom. Please. Call me back. You can't do this to me. I know I was wrong. But you're my mother. You have to forgive me. Leonard lied about some things. You know how he exaggerates. Mom. I'm desperate. Please. Each message only carved deeper into the painful truth I had finally accepted. Julia only remembered my existence when she needed something. On Monday morning, I went back to school and continued teaching. As if nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. I looked at my 5th graders and wondered what kind of children will they become someday. I often watched the mothers picking up their kids and asked myself how many of them had gone through what I had lived. By Thursday of that same week, I received an unexpected call. Mrs. Arlene. This is Leonard. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. Since the wedding night, I had thought of him often, trying to understand why he did what he did. Why he risked his happiness to defend me. Leonard. I stammered. Are you doing all right? I'm fine. Thank you. Actually, I'm calling to ask how you've been since Saturday. I haven't stopped wondering if we did the right thing. We. That's what he said. As if we were partners in a monumental decision. Do you regret it? I asked. A long silence before he answered. No. He finally said. I don't regret it at all. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. You didn't deserve to be treated that way for even one more second. Those words touched a corner of my heart that had been asleep for years. Leonard. You didn't have to do that. You destroyed your marriage because of me. No. Mrs. Arlene. I saved my life. I realized just in time who Julia really is. And you were the key that opened my eyes to it. We talked for nearly an hour. Leonard told me about the days after the wedding, the non-stop calls from Julia, Margaret's efforts to patch things up, the pressure from society pushing him to forgive and move on. Everyone keeps saying it was just pre-wedding stress. He said that Julia isn't really like that, that I overreacted. But what do you think? Mrs. Arlene, a person who's cruel enough to humiliate her own mother in public doesn't change overnight. What I saw that night was Julia's true self, when there was no one important for her to perform for. His words confirmed what I had felt but never dared to say out loud. Leonard. May I ask you something? Of course. Why did you do it? Why risk everything to defend me? A long silence. Then he answered, because my grandmother raised me after my parents died. She always taught me that the way a person treats their mother says everything about their character. When I saw how Julia treated you, I realized exactly what kind of person I was about to marry. And now, what are you going to do? Now, I'm going to rebuild my life. Start over. What about you? After everything? How do you feel? That was a question no one had asked me in years. How do I feel? Not how am I managing financially. Not whether I need help. Not whether I can handle someone else's needs. But me, Arlene, how do I feel? Confused. I admitted. Hurting. But also, free. Strange as it sounds, it's not strange. Leonard replied gently. It's natural. You've spent years being diminished by the very person who should have cherished you. Now you can finally see your own light. When we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. That conversation with Leonard made me realize I wasn't alone in rebuilding my life. There was someone who understood, who validated my feelings, who saw the value in the real me. In the days that followed, Leonard and I began talking more often. Unexpected phone calls, short text messages, long coffee meetings that stretched into hours. It wasn't love, at least. Not yet. It was something deeper: friendship, empathy, respect. I learned that Leonard had lost his parents at 15 and was raised by his grandmother, a strong woman who faced life's hardships alone. He understood a mother's sacrifice because he had witnessed it firsthand. He had learned to value people through the quiet gestures of love, not through appearances. My grandmother was a seamstress who raised me. He told me once over coffee. She stayed up late into the night, sewing evening gowns for others so I could have books, clean clothes, food on the table. And how did you learn to appreciate that? I asked. Because she never let me forget that true love is shown through actions, not words. That sacrifice isn't an obligation, but a choice. And when someone chooses to sacrifice for you, that deserves a lifetime of gratitude. That was exactly what I had tried to teach Julia all those years but failed. 3 weeks after the broken wedding, Julia showed up at my house unexpectedly. It was a Tuesday night. I had just come home from work and was preparing a simple dinner when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door and saw her standing on the porch, eyes red from crying, looking as worn out as she had back in her teenage years. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I come in for a moment?" The motherly instinct in me surged. I wanted to hug her, to comfort her, to do anything to take away her pain. But a firm voice inside me said, "Not that easy. That depends." I replied. Are you here to ask me to fix another problem for you? Or to have a real conversation about our relationship? She froze, clearly taken aback by my answer. A few seconds later, she just stared at me, as if she were seeing a stranger in her mother's body. I want to talk, she finally said. Really talk. I opened the door and let her in. But this time, I didn't rush to make coffee, didn't scramble to make her comfortable. We sat in the living room, and I waited for her to speak first. Mom, these past 3 weeks have been the worst time of my life, she began. Leonard refuses to see me. Margaret treats me like an outsider. Half my friends avoid me. And you abandoned me too. There it was again. The victim role. The avoidance of responsibility. Julia, I said calmly. I didn't abandon you. I just stopped accepting being treated like something disposable in your life. But you're my mom. You've always been my rock. Being a rock is different from being a doormat. Julia, I replied, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. A rock protects you when you need it. A doormat only exists to be trampled on when it's convenient. She burst into tears. Real tears. Carrying deep sorrow. I didn't know you felt that way, she whispered. Of course you knew. Julia, you just chose to ignore it because it was convenient for you. That night, we talked for 2 hours. It was the most honest conversation we had shared in years. Julia admitted she had been ashamed of our simple family ever since she entered Leonard's world. She admitted she had treated our relationship as something guaranteed, something that would exist no matter how she treated me. But then she tried to justify herself, to minimize, to shift part of the blame elsewhere. You never told me you were hurt, she argued. How was I supposed to know? A daughter doesn't need a warning label to realize when she's hurting her mother. I replied, that's called empathy, and you lost it somewhere along the way. When she left that night, there were no grand promises of reconciliation, no dramatic hugs, no declarations of eternal love, only a quiet understanding that our relationship had changed forever. And for the first time in 34 years, I felt at peace with that. 2 years after the wedding that ended the very same day, my life had changed in ways I never thought possible. It was a Sunday morning when I received the call that would change everything once again. I was in the kitchen making coffee for Leonard and me, a morning ritual we had kept for the past 6 months. Ever since we decided that friendship had grown into something deeper. Arlene. It's Leonard, he said as he walked into the kitchen, holding the phone with an unusual look on his face. Julia is calling you. Over the past 2 years, my daughter had tried several times to reconnect a few scattered calls. Some birthday messages, tentative efforts I accepted with politeness, but also with the cautiousness of someone who had learned to protect herself. Answer it, Leonard whispered. It might be important. I took the phone, drew in a deep breath, and answered. Mom. Julia's voice sounded different, more mature, carrying a softness I hadn't heard in years. Hello. Julia. How are you, Mom? I know I have no right to ask. But, could I see you? I really need to talk to you. There was something in her tone that moved me. Not the calculating desperation of 2 years ago, nor the anger from the first months after the wedding. This was something more genuine, more human. What is it? Sweetheart, I asked. Nothing is okay, Mom. And I finally understand some things I should have realized long ago. We agreed to meet at a downtown cafe the following afternoon. All that Sunday, I was restless, unsure of what I was about to face. Leonard noticed my unease, pulled me close, and whispered, whatever she says. You've built yourself a beautiful life. Nothing and no one can take that away. He was right. The past 2 years had been the happiest of my life. After Julia and I redefined our relationship, distant but respectful, I finally had the space to discover who Arlene was, beyond the role of Julia's mother. I went back to school. I took a literature course I had always dreamed of. I began writing at first just personal reflections, then short stories about life, praised by friends who encouraged me to post them on a blog. And then there was Leonard. Our feelings grew naturally, unhurried, built on respect and genuine understanding. He saw me as a complete woman, interesting, with her own worth. For the first time in decades, I felt desired not for what I could do for someone, but for who I was. 6 months ago, when he officially asked me to be with him, it felt like reliving my 20s again at 60. Arlene, he once told me during an evening walk through the little square near our home, hand in hand. You've taught me that you can start over at any age. You've taught me that true worth lies in character, not in appearances. You've taught me that real love is built on the little things you do every day, not on grand declarations. We had decided to marry at the end of the year, no show, no extravagance. Just a simple ceremony with those who truly mattered. Those who loved us for who we were, not for social status. On Monday, I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early. Julia was already sitting in a corner, nervously stirring her coffee. When she saw me, she immediately stood. The woman before me looked so much older than just 2 years ago. In her eyes was a deep sadness, but also something I hadn't seen in a very long time: humility. "Mom, thank you for coming," she said, hugging me hesitantly, as if unsure she was welcome. We tried to start, then fell into silence for a few minutes. She fidgeted with her spoon, clearly gathering courage to speak. "Mom, I need to tell you what's happened to me these past 2 years." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "When Leonard left me, I was angry at you, at him, at the whole world. I thought everyone had conspired against me, that no one understood the pressure I was under." She paused, drawing in a deep breath. But then everything really started to fall apart. Margaret openly blamed me for the scandal. She said I not only disgraced her family, but shamed our own as well. Half my friends disappeared. I listened in silence, no judgment, no rush to comfort. I lost my job. "Mom?" The company said they couldn't keep someone whose name had become too notorious to deal with big clients. I froze. "How could that be, video?" she said, avoiding my eyes. "Someone recorded the entire scene at the wedding. Leonard calling it off. Me being humiliated in front of everyone. Then you leaving with him." That video spread all over the internet. A chill ran down my spine. I never imagined our story would be exposed to the public like that. The video was shared thousands of times. Julia continued, with countless comments defending you and condemning me. "Ungrateful daughter. Heartless woman. Anyone who treats their mother like that deserves to end up alone." I became a living example of what a daughter should never do. For the first time since we started talking, she looked me straight in the eyes. "And do you know what the worst part is?" "Mom, the worst part is that every single one of those comments was true." That confession pierced my heart in a way I never expected. For 2 years, I had tried to avoid all the public chatter, focusing only on healing and rebuilding my life. I lost everything I once thought mattered. She went on. Social status, opportunistic friends, a prestigious job, the recognition of all the so-called right people. And when all that was stripped away, I was left with only myself, and I had to face the truth. I had become a horrible person. Tears streamed down her face. But this time, she didn't try to hide them. I started therapy a year ago, and in every session, I discovered another layer of selfishness, ingratitude, and cruelty that I had been carrying inside me. I realized She had become exactly the kind of person I used to despise when I was young. "And what do you want from me now?" "Julia," I asked gently, "I don't want you to forgive me. I don't want things to go back to the way they were. I don't want you to fix my problems or comfort me." Those words caught me off guard. "I just want you to know that I finally understand. I understand the value of everything you did for me. I understand the greatness of your sacrifices. I understand that the love you always gave me was pure, unconditional, and real." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "And I also understand that I wasted the greatest treasure anyone could ever have, a mother who truly loves them." We sat in silence for a few minutes. I weighed her words carefully, trying to distinguish sincerity from possible manipulation. I had learned to be cautious. "Julia," I finally said, "I appreciate your honesty, and I'm glad you've begun this journey of self-awareness." But she looked up, clearly sensing there was more. "But forgiveness isn't something that can be handed out instantly. Trust can't be rebuilt in a single conversation, and I'm not the same mother I was 2 years ago." She nodded, which surprised me. "I know, Mom, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I've changed, that I've understood. If one day you ever decide to give me a chance to prove I can be a better daughter, I'll be here. And if you never give me that chance, I'll accept it, because it's the consequence of the choices I made." For the first time in our conversation, I caught a glimpse of the grown woman Julia could become. "There's one more thing I need to say." She hesitated. "What is it I know about your engagement to Leonard?" My heart clenched. "How did you find out?" "Social media. A mutual friend posted a photo of you two, with the caption saying how wonderful it was to witness true love." I waited for her reaction, bracing myself for anything. "And I just want to say, I'm happy for you." Her words left me stunned. "Leonard is an honorable, kind man. He looks at you the way you've always deserved to be seen. You two have built something based on real values." She paused, smiling for the first time since we met. "He even posted a photo of you two last Sunday, making coffee together in the kitchen. You were laughing so brightly at something he said. And I thought, that's exactly how you should have been seen all along, happy, valued, and loved the right way." When we left the cafe 2 hours later, there were no miraculous promises of reconciliation, no dramatic embraces, no eternal declarations of love. But there was something new: mutual respect. Julia had finally grown enough to admit her mistakes without expecting instant forgiveness. And I had grown enough to listen without being manipulated by the guilt of being a mother. 3 months later, Leonard and I were married in a small, perfect ceremony. Only 30 truly dear people were there. Julia wasn't present, but she sent a letter that I still keep to this day. "Mom, I know I don't deserve to be there today, but I want you to know how happy I am for you. You taught me that it's never too late to start over, to find happiness, to be valued the way you truly deserve. Thank you for being that example. One day, I hope I'll be strong enough to follow in your footsteps, with love and respect. Julia." Today, at 60 years old, I can say that I am completely happy. I've found true love with Leonard. I've built a life based on my own values. I've discovered talents and passions I never knew I had. And Julia, she is slowly rebuilding her own life, with dignity, and with a sense of responsibility for the choices she has made. We still keep in touch. Sometimes, always with courtesy and respect. Maybe one day our relationship will grow closer. Maybe it won't, and that's okay. Because I've learned that loving someone does not mean accepting being treated poorly. That being a mother does not mean erasing yourself. That it is never too late to recognize your own true worth. The woman who once walked out of that banquet hall in humiliation 2 years ago no longer exists. In her place is a woman who chooses her own happiness, who knows how to set boundaries, and who has found someone who truly cherishes her. And that woman finally is me. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you were in my place, what would you do? Your words might bring light to someone's day. Ends T.